I didn't realize it until I just looked up and I was like, oh, Mark's got on the old Lancer colors. Welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. It is May 3rd, 2022. A shocker last night. We're going to talk about Roe versus Wade. There was a leaked document. We're also going to talk about just little nitpicks of the Supreme Court and leaks in social media. I'm going to, full disclosure, before I ask you the most important question of the day. This, for me personally, 100% thinking out loud today.
Oh, I think most of the aspects of it that we're going to do is thinking out loud.
Yeah. So if you want to join in, comment, keep them reasonable, but think out loud with us, please.
Because all our thoughts are reasonable.
But think out loud with us, please, as we talk about kind of shocking news last night. I think a lot of people were shocked by what happened last night.
I think in our I feel fine, by the way. So there we go. We'll get that out of the way. I feel good. I did have a cute little tidbit story other than Roe versus Wade, but when have they not been talking about this? And I'm not even just saying the right to lifers have kind of been beating this drum for a long time that Roe v. Wade should be overturned. And it's just kind of been part of our life. Like, there are people out there who disagree with it.
Can we start there? Like, before we get to Roe versus Wade, I'm always shocked at how many people have an opinion about this, and a solid opinion. Like, they have, it's concrete, they've thought about it, and you are not changing their mind.
Considering how many people it's ever affected?
Yes.
I'm with you.
I am blown away. Like, when I've had debates, discussions, call them what you want, with friends, family members, acquaintances, and it always shocks me because sometimes I'll be looking at people and I have an opinion just to kind of join the debate, just to be in the discussion. Right. But sometimes I'll be listening to people and I'm like, I cannot believe you are this matters.
Like, you're dying on this hill.
Yes. This really, really matters to you. And from both sides, it's right. Very flag in the yard. This is what we're doing here. And that always surprises me because I think there's a lot of other issues that are, I don't want not to put down the issue, but I think there's other issues worth debating that have just as much merit, if not more than this one, but people could care less.
I've said ever since I was probably old enough to get it, at least I think I get it. If you're casting your vote for a public elected official on their stance on abortion, then you're missing the big picture. Because as you said, there are 100 more important policies that affect all of us, as opposed to this, who, as you're right, it affects so much fewer.
Yeah. Now
many fewer.
No, yeah, I think you had it right the first time. I think.
All right.
Now the irony to what you and I just said, I think part of the reason I felt that way is because there just was always Roe versus Wade.
Right.
And so it was just kind of like a safety valve. And obviously people have always tinkered with the safety valve, and different states have tried their own little gimmicks and games around it. But I just think I was there's Roe versus Wade, and anything more than that, we're really just having an intellectual debate at this point. We're not really deciding
we hope the debate is intellectual.
Yes, but
we're having a debate.
But we weren't really deciding the fate of women and children.
Right.
I mean, if there are people out there who want to say now it is up for debate, I would certainly take that more now than I did before.
Yes. So we can, there are, real world sides of it that now how much does this, to start with, it's been around 50 years.
Yeah.
And it is, I don't want to say it's shocking to me that these Supreme Court justices have said, I know this law has been around for 50 years, but it's been wrong for 50 years, and we are here to right the wrong.
Yeah.
Now, I know we've had other laws like that, women not voting was the way of the world until it became, and obviously slavery had been around for centuries, and then it was, there have been things in history that have been around for a long time, and then they were kiboshed because society thought it was wrong. So, this, I don't want to say it's totally unprecedented. It's just odd that they're Roe v. Wade was wrong from the vote. So that I found interesting. from it goes back to now states' rights, because this is just federally. Like, states can kind of still do more of what they want. And what does this do to, because right now it's always, you hear these people who are really like states' rights but the world has become so small that when I moved from Pennsylvania to Maryland, because my brother was pitching for the Orioles, I didn't think about what rights I was giving up leaving Pennsylvania and how this affected my life. I was just going across an imaginary line on a road.
Sure.
But now these things really come into it. So we've got that. We can go to the another aspect of it, that is, how did this get leaked? Because there aren't reporters in this room. And what's his name just came out and said, I just read this before we started, that he is now investigating, or there will be an investigation to see how it got leaked. And then we can even speculate as to why it got leaked. And then you can go even one step further and say, with the corruption of politics and the wealthy of the world and these people who say, does anyone debate at all that if one of these Republican politicians who is so much right to life, if their little girl got pregnant, needed an abortion, he would get her one?
So do I get to pick which one to start
You
with?
go wherever you want.
I would like to, personally, there's two parts of this that I've always been fascinated by. The first one is that says men in general need to butt out of decisions about abortion. I've always found that fascinating. I totally get the argument that it's a woman's body, it's a woman's choice, it's a woman's decision. And I totally get that. I also, though, I would never tell a woman that they couldn't debate something that I was debating because it's a men's issue. Personally, like me personally, like I would never.
A men's issue? What,
I'm just saying,
prostate?
I don't know.
Like,
I'm just
what
saying,
is your,
like I would
what's
never.
a man's issue?
I'm just saying, like I would
erectile
never,
dysfunction.
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm saying abortion is one of the only things in the world where, like, I do think there's this idea that like a white male maybe shouldn't be talking about abortion, but like if I was talking about something that maybe a woman didn't have a say, or like I personally wouldn't tell them that they can't join the debate or that they can't join the discussion. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, I don't.
I mean, if Pat's talking about like policymakers, then maybe it's a different discussion. But it just like in general, like the conversation, like I don't know. I feel like I could.
Yeah,
I feel like I should be a part of it.
We can intelligently be part of the discussion. One of the aspects that women always say is because men can just, men are obviously part of the impregnation process,
Sure.
but then they just can disappear, and so often do disappear.
Okay. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think that like the first thing that I would just bring up, I do think it's an everybody issue. I do think it's an everybody topic. I understand that one side of the population is affected more by it, but in general, like you need votes, like you need people to support it. Like if you're pro-abortion, you need people to be pro-abortion. If you're anti-abortion, like you need people to be anti-abortion. The idea to just solo out and be like, men just stay over there, I don't know if that necessarily works.
I mean, there's a point that men,
because by the way, women don't agree on this. Like this isn't like all the women are standing over there and they all agree on it.
No.
Right. So I'm just saying, so like to just tell the men to stand over there because like they'll disagree with you. I don't know. Like I've never understood that.
But I do understand the aspect of it would be like, should women be able to talk about, and I don't even know militarily, are women on the front lines yet, or is it still just men on the front lines?
Know.
But back in the day, or even still is, when only men were on the front lines, then women, like, I could understand if I'm a guy in the military and like, I don't really care what her opinion is because they ain't shooting at her and they ain't gonna shoot at her because she isn't here.
But see,
so
I guess what I'm saying is like, I still think they could be a part of the discussion.
They could be,
yeah,
but their opinion is way watered down. It's easy for a guy to make a comment about abortion because it will never ever be us.
But I think I think the sentiment though is that there's this idea that most men don't care enough to have a valid opinion about abortion.
No, I don't think that's
You don't
it.
think that's what
I
it
think
is?
it's that it will never, like, there's no biological way that you're the one on the table.
No, I agree with that. But I think there are people that like it still affects their life. Now, they don't have to go through the physical labor, the physical changes that a woman would have to do. But like, they're like, it's still fatherhood, whether you decide to be a part of it or not.
It affects their life, but
I'm not saying it's
as much.
I'm not saying it's a 50-50 split. What I'm saying though is like I've never understood telling a man to go stand in the corner for this discussion. I've never understood that aspect of it.
What do you think women go tell men to go stand in the corner for lots of discussions?
I think sometimes there's this idea that like
no, I do get your
like,
point.
We just shouldn't talk about it, and I don't know. Like I just
No,
don't necessarily agree.
I
with
think
that.
there's a level. It's like
the second thing I want to talk about was the
Go
leaks because
who?
the leaks. Because
Okay.
selfishly, like the leaking this aspect of the Supreme Court. I said to you,
John Roberts, by the way, said we will investigate.
Okay,
that was the justice.
So two ways to look at this. You brought up that if a Democrat leaked it, somebody on the left leaked it, right?
My philosophy is that a Democrat leaked it because they want to get public outcry to try to sway someone or two. They didn't want this to go quietly by and then all of a sudden show up one morning and say it's official.
Yes. Two ways to look at that. One way is what you just said.
That's all speculation.
Yeah, totally. Like we said, we're thinking out loud.
We're all
today.
speculating.
We are thinking out loud today. There is the first side of that is trying to round up the votes that you can vote for. Don't go quietly into the night of the red tide that is about to happen. Fair? Like that's one side of this. The irony to that is there is a lot of play right now of people kind of saying like it puts a lot of weight on the Democrats in the House, in the Senate, on the president, because you almost now have to do something about this because the sentiment is a lot of Democrats won't come out to vote again because what's the point of having the president, the House, and the Senate if they're not going to do something about overturning Roe versus Wade? And so you kind of force the Democrats' hand in a way, which makes me think it might have been
a Republican.
Could
be.
The leak to me is very, very fascinating. Who had more to gain from it? And I think both sides could make an argument. It wouldn't shock me if it was either side.
There's a strategy from either side.
Yes. That part I'm very, very interested in to see how it plays out as it goes along. Also, too, like just I think we're getting to the point now with the internet and social media and all these other things. I think there's still this false concept that some things are leak proof, and they're just not. Like that. Like I don't think anything is leak proof anymore.
Everything you say to me before the show, I go post it right.
I believe it. I'm just saying though, like I don't think anything is like this perfect box. And I think for some people, like the idea is like the Supreme Court and like it can't. And it's just like no, like they're playing. They are in the same game as everybody else. Do we hope they hold it to a higher standard? Sure. But like they're playing the same game as everybody else.
So now the next question, and I asked this because I don't know. Does it become, this is just federal. Yeah. If it now goes back to states' rights, do the liberal states, does California, does New York, do they become the abortion capitals as Vegas is the marriage capital of the world? How does that work? You can be a Pennsylvania resident, go to Vegas and get married and it's legal.
Right.
Can you be a Pennsylvania resident, go to New York State and get an abortion and have it be legal? How does that, I mean, I would suspect like drinking ages were drinking ages back before you were born, but not every state was 21. It was 18 and 19. Right. And I've heard the legends of people that I think New York State was younger than 21 and people would drive north to go to New York to drink at 19 or 20 or whatever they could. Right. So does this happen? Is everyone still able to get an abortion as long as they go to the right place?
The statistical answer, like this would be the analytical side of it, is I would love to see marriages compared to abortions on an annual basis. Because the reason it works for Vegas is because X amount of people get married every year. And so I don't know X amount of people, how many X amount of people get abortions every year? I don't know. Is it enough of a tipping point to make some of these places, as you said, like
Right. No, I know.
abortion stay-holds where like that's not what they become known for, but it is like where people have a safe haven and they go and do it essentially. Without looking at the numbers, I don't know the answer to that. The other part that you said, like, I think we have a false idea of state lines. And I think what's going to happen is they're slowly, I think it's almost a bell curve. So we went through this period of time where it was like federal regulation, and it like kind of like tapped out. And recently you've seen it start to go back the other way. And really, like, even with COVID, like the Trump administration kind of being like, go fend for yourself, like every state, like go figure out. And so I do wonder what that looks like as we kind of come back down this bell curve when more things are passed off to individual states again, like they used to be. I do. Yeah. I think a state line will matter significantly more 10 years from now than what it did 20, 30.
But is that insane? Like,
no,
when you're,
well, no, I'm like, sorry, not to cut you off. I don't know if it's like positive or negative. I just know that we're not ready for it. Like, I know that the average person's conception of like crossing over state to state is not that significant right now.
It's zero.
Exactly. And so I do wonder, like 10 years from now, all of a sudden is crossing a state. Like, the only time I worried about crossing a state line was like going to the beach and like having to go to like a state store and like some, you know what I mean? Like some were closed after a certain, like the Delaware bars closed later than like the Jersey bars. And so, I mean, like, there were these useless state line guidelines that like affected me like growing up in my 20s. But all of a sudden, like when I'm into my 40s, like 10 years from now, like all of a sudden are there more substantial things that matter when I cross a state line?
Yeah, it's a very good question because of jobs. The world is more nomadic. I'm thinking of college kids. My oldest daughter goes to Pitt. Because neither of them really wanted to stay close to home.
Okay.
So she went to Pitt, which is still in Pennsylvania, but it's 3.5 hours away. My daughter, who's a senior, is going to Vassar. Vassar, it's up on our list.
That's right.
It's over there.
They haven't called us to take it down
and
yet.
it is, and that's in New York.
Yeah.
So like now all of a sudden, are their worlds that different? One's 3.5 hours that way, one's 3.5 hours the other way, but one's across the state line. So is the world really different for one as opposed to the other?
Yes, the one is going to have to figure out how to get her alcohol from somewhere other than a Sheetz.
They don't have Sheetz in New York?
They will know. So I think in New York State, I could be wrong. I think New York State, you don't have to go to a state store. Someone correct me on that. Someone comment. Pennsylvania, you still, like, if you want liquor, you still have to go to a state store.
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hoping she just
I think
studies.
New York State, you can just like walk in. I think New York State, you can just like walk in. So Heather just looked it up. We're gonna trust Heather here. I just looked it up. There are approximately 2,363 abortions in the U.S. every day. The article was published in October with the most recent data available, which was from Planned Parenthood in 2017. So I'm going to, not to sound like a jerk, I'm going to assume those are like legal abortions. Like I'm going to assume.
Well, that's one of the other
underground abortion, which is a whole other conversation.
One of a couple, the two most interesting things I've seen tweeted today, or whatever, memed, that taking Roe versus Wade away will not eliminate abortions. Okay. It will eliminate safe, legal abortions.
Okay.
Which is very true. And
so real quick, I'm sorry, just because I just pulled it up. So just to put that into context, and again, this is not like pro or anti-abortion. I'm saying just to put in the context, in 2019, there were around 2.02 million marriages in the United States.
2019, and how many of those are still together?
I don't know. But just over 2 million. And then abortions in 2017, there were just over 2,000.
No, that's a day.
Oh, every day. So do the math. 2,000 times 365.
365. So it's a million.
A million. Okay. So yeah. So I mean, it could have a very similar effect to that. Like, could you have like a marriage capital of the world like Vegas? Like, could you have an abortion capital of America? Yeah. I mean, there's enough of them. Mathematically speaking, like you could certainly have hotbeds that statistically.
And then again, the next question becomes of, if you want to get married, like you know, if you know of anyone who wants to get married, like anyone, I don't know, you're dating or anyone like that.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I was talking to you. But you want to get married, and you know, weddings cost however much money,
Yes.
and you want to just go to the courthouse, you want to go to the justice of the peace, and you can just pay for a marriage license, do it very cheaply. You can do that anywhere. You don't have to go to Vegas. Vegas is kind of a destination, whatever.
Sure.
So now this comes to, depending on where you're at, and especially when you get out in the Midwest, you get out in the Bible Belt, which is very red.
Sure.
And you've got people who are poor, and now they have to travel great distances to get an abortion, whereas a marriage, you could just go to the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
That is one aspect of it. One of the other things I saw that was tweeted or memed or whatever you want to say is that they called it, they didn't call it the right to life. They called it the right to birth. And because they said once they're born, this party that is so hell-bent on making sure that abortions are illegal, once these kids are born into poverty, they're just kind of like, well, you're poor because your parents screwed up. It's not our fault, and fend for yourself. And that it's that is a debate, like, and all these things, we come up with hypocrisy, like with the left with the my body, my choice. But then when vaccinations come up, they weren't my body, my choice. Right. And the left found themselves to be very hypocritical.
Sure.
The right, who is this, oh, you need to have this kid, but then the kid's born into poverty, and then you're on your own. And that's also very hypocritical from the right. So it becomes a great, like, why is the right so hell-bent on having these kids born into poverty that then they're just left to twist in the wind, and nobody feels any societal obligation? They just blame the parents.
Yeah, because I think people get so caught up on what is life in that aspect of it. Like, what is a life? When does life start? Like, those are significant questions. I don't want to call them debates, because I think it is amazing how many people get offended when you say it's a fair question. Because to some people, like, it's so obvious when life starts. Like, it's when there's a heartbeat, it's when conception. Like, everyone has their own scientific belief of, like, when that actually begins. But I think those are the questions at the meat of it. And then everything outside of that, when people are in the debate, they're not focusing on that. I truly believe that.
No, I get that.
I think there's a lot of people deep into both sides that when they get heated and they're going back and forth and they're throwing out this statistic and this fact and all of a sudden you very rarely talk about what happens after birth. And I don't know.
I wonder what percentage of these are born into poverty. You know, I'm pro-choice. My mother was an OBGYN nurse for 100 years. That was her career. And she is pro-choice because this is what she did. And she saw how many of these, you know, how many kids were born into poverty. And I understand when you look at, you know, if you want to make the argument that it's this kid and this kid's chance, and you're taking away this kid's chance at life, and I get it, but on the flip side of it, that how many of these kids are already born and they're suffering and they're starving and they're poor and they're in horrible conditions, and now you're just going to add to that.
No, it's just the chance parable, and like who do you want to give a chance and whose chance do you want to take away? And I don't know if there's an answer. I'm not trying to put down anybody who's pro-choice. I'm not putting down anybody who's, you know, anti-choice. Like, for me, it is, I've heard great arguments from both sides. I've sat and nodded my head to people who have made exact opposite arguments. And I'm like, you know what? Like, if you were the only person in the room, like, you would have me convinced, and vice versa. So I don't know. I am bummed out. We went 23 and a half minutes talking about abortion without making our stance on it, and I wanted to get to 30 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I didn't know.
I wanted the iron. I wanted to be able to say, like, we are the only two people in America that could talk about abortion for 30 minutes without saying what side of it we ended up on.
And here's one of and you've still held strong. You've kept your poker face. I didn't know that. I didn't know I was supposed to. One of the questions that I've always had is, like, the pro-choice aspect isn't abortion. Like, I always felt like if I was in the situation, I would want the woman to have my kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so my choice would be life, but it's still a choice.
Sure.
So I just don't understand why the people who are, if you're really, really, really pro-life, then if you get pregnant or you knock someone up, then have it. But just, I don't get why you being pro-life means that they need
because
to be
I think it's because I think, and again, I'm not even arguing like my side. I think there's this idea of it's about chance and who do you want to give the chance to. And so like a kid's born into poverty or a kid doesn't, but like they have a chance to combat it. They have a chance to figure it out. They have a chance to make the best of it. Like I've heard really compelling arguments for the idea of if you're giving somebody the pro-life choice, you're giving them the chance of how they want to live their life or survive their life or what's best for them. And I understand both arguments of like just pro-chance and the idea of like, I want to give everyone a chance. And that's, and so when you're pro-choice, it's hard to say that everyone got a chance. But again, like, then you get into these definitions of like, when does life start? Who is everyone? When, like, and those are anybody who thinks they have those answers, I find that very hard to believe.
Yeah, and I'm with you. But then on the flip side of it is, yes, you want to give everyone a chance, but then you've got this kid that's born into poverty. How much are you going to help?
But that's literally the point. The point isn't about how are you going to help them. The point is that like they have like it's the American dream. It's the human cognition of like you have an opportunity to like pull yourself up and make the best of it, whether that is or not. Some people get cancer. Some people have, like it happens. Like,
I get it.
Life happens. And the idea is like, what do you do with it and how do you do it? So I have heard great arguments from both sides. I'm not going to state which one I find myself standing on, but I think the uniquest part about this and why I enjoy talking to people about it is I like to see who's black and white and who is gray, because the black and white people fascinate me. Like the people who just can't
in most aspects of life, the black and white people fascinate you?
Because just
unless you're talking about something true, like a movie you're like, that movie sucks. Then who cares?
Because I have heard so many unique takes. I've heard so many different arguments. I've heard people talk about it from a scientific point of view. I've heard people talk about it from a spiritual point of view. I've heard their own personal anecdotes and experiences. I have heard so many different stories pro and anti-abortion. And so when I add all that up in my head, I am blown away that there are people that are just like 100. I get like if you're 80-20, if you're 75-20, like I get it. But the people that are like 100%, I'm just like, you're not talking then. Like you're not hearing everybody's point of view. Like you're not listening. Like you're not taking it all in. I truly believe this is one of the few topics where I believe that. It's really hard to be 100%er on this one. But I think people are. Like I think most people are 100%, and that's why it's fascinating.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. You find very few people who are like, pro-life, pro-choice, I can go either way. I flip a coin.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that.
And I just think this is way more of like an 80-20, 70-30 debate than it should ever be like people just being, I don't know. Like I said, I get people have their devout. I get people have their opinions. I totally understand I have my own opinion. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think I could ever say I'm 100%er on this one.
Do you think this leads to, assuming this goes to pass, and I guess from what I've read, and I've learned a lot in the last, that they've taken like a preliminary vote, which I guess is a straw poll. They think they have enough votes, and now they're writing up the opinions, which there's always the winning opinion, the losing opinion. There's a technical term for it. It's not winning and losing, but sure. Majority, minority, maybe. But it's a process. Like this, it doesn't happen like this. Like, hey, show hands, pass, sure. Yay, nay, and pass. So people have changed their minds, I guess, in the process, and this could be months coming up. But do you think this changes laws for men? Because one of the arguments that men have had is that they don't get any. I'm getting a call from Colorado. Where was yours from? Oh, Providence, Rhode Island.
Yours was Rhode Island.
So. I'm getting a call from Colorado. So, men have no say in the aspect of whether a woman aborts his child or not. But then on the flip side, men have no responsibility. I mean, they kind of do, and they but the man's ability to disappear on the kid is much easier than the woman's ability to disappear on the kid. So does that come into play? Because again, it's very easy for men to sit up there and say, yes, you should have it. And then we'll just, especially the lawmaking rich men who are just like, why, we'll just write a check. And I mean, it's one of the other great, starting in Congress, working all the way up to the White House, how many male politicians who have been anti-abortion have paid for abortions?
Sure.
That
it would be really interesting.
That is a great question.
It's a higher number than I bet we think.
Yes. Just as how many popes have had kids.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, these are, so it goes back to, so when I asked one of my early ramblings, do you debate for a minute if any well-to-do Republican, if their daughter needed an abortion, they would find a way to get it?
Yeah, which I think you brought this point up earlier, and I saw someone post this, and again, it's kind of opinionated, so I didn't bring it up. But now that I did, you'll just pile on. It up, someone said there's no such thing as lowering abortions. You're just making more unsafe ones. And statistically, that is probably true. There's probably a ton of statistical evidence that could actually prove that correct. That when you try to ban abortions, the abortion number probably doesn't diminish that much. It probably goes down a little, but realistically, the difference is just are they in a sterile room? Are they getting it done by a professional? And so I've heard so many different arguments. I get that one as well. I find myself more and more, and I'm not going to give away what side I'm on, because if I had to vote one way or the other, I do know which way I would go, because I've had so many conversations about this. The part that will always kind of blow me away is that that it shouldn't be an open discussion, and that it's only for a select group of people. And I just completely did, because I've been in conversation with people, and the opinion gets dismissed because they're a male, or their opinion gets dismissed because they don't have a kid, or you know what I'm saying? There's all these different scenarios where all of a sudden your opinion is kind of pushed off to the side.
Well, I think in general, in all those situations, your opinion gets dismissed if your opinion is disagreeing with someone else.
But if I was agreeing with them, they put their arm around me.
It doesn't matter what you're talking about. But no, I mean, I do get what men can certainly have intelligent discussions about abortion.
They can have stupid ones too.
Yes, but I certainly understand why a woman's opinion outranks ours in this issue.
I certainly I value their opinion significantly more, but I would never, if I was talking to a man and a woman about it, I would not tell the man just go over there. I think I would want to hear them both out. Now I get there's loud mouths, and I get there's people that
you'd hear them both out
to rile up the other side.
There's a difference between hearing them both out and then at the end of the day saying that I get in a coin flip, I'm going with her.
But I still go back to my other point too. There is, when we talk about it's a woman's choice and it's the woman's body and all that, I get all of it, but there's it doesn't mean that every woman agrees with you too.
Agreed.
So it's just this idea that you're gonna solo it out to if you're not in this gender, you guys don't all agree. There's not a consensus on your side of it. So I don't know. That is my one nitpick about having this conversation.
See, one of the other aspects that I would love to have is how many people had abortions. I would love to poll the people who have had abortions, and then later on, what were their feelings about it?
Okay.
But just in general, the people that want to have abortions, it is an unwanted pregnancy.
Can I give you a couple of? Oh, sorry, go.
Well, and I was just going to say, in any aspect of with coaching, how many kids on the team do you want who don't want to be there? 0. So when we're talking about the chances of these kids, even just kids born into poverty, what are their chances with the American dream? Well, how about the chances of the kids that are wanted and loved and still cared for, and as opposed to the kids who are not, because there are other scientific aspects of kids, as your brain grows and develops, and there's like connections, and it becomes like a roadmap, and there's studies that kids who are held more when they're younger, that their brain develops better, and kids who are talked to more when they're younger, that their brain develops better. So there are kids, why this 18-year-old is different than this 18-year-old isn't because this one just doesn't care, or has a bad attitude or whatever. This one's brain literally developed better because they were cared for better when they were younger. So the one has a brain that this brain just doesn't work as well as that one, and it's not their fault. So that's an aspect too. We act like all 20-year-olds are the same, and now if they want to start at 20, they can. And it's just like saying some people run faster than others. Some people jump higher than others. Some people are stronger than others. Some people, their brains were developed better because of how they were treated as youngsters. And that so much has to do with whether you are wanted or
not. Yes.
There's my soliloquy.
Good. Do you want some updates?
Sure.
Supreme Court confirms, this was an hour ago, the Supreme Court confirms the authenticity of the draft. So the draft,
it was real.
So the draft has been approved. The Chief Justice has ordered an investigation into the leak. But in that order, it basically says that this is a correct draft.
So is this a WikiLeaks?
I don't know if it's a WikiLeaks or not. But yeah, that was from John G. Roberts, Chief Justice. The other one too, President Biden also made a statement. I had it up here. Do you want to hear a little bit?
I heard he said something about a woman's rights should never be taken away.
Yeah, so he said this 3 hours ago. We do not know whether this draft is genuine. It is. We know that for a fact now. Whether it reflects the final decision of the court. With that critical view, I wanted to be clear on 3 points about the cases before the Supreme Court. First, my administration argued strongly before the court in defense of Roe versus Wade. And then it goes on to talk about that, but essentially saying we defend it. Second, shortly after the enactment of Texas law, so that was when all that was going on. What was that, like 3 months ago, 4 months ago?
Like that.
Other laws restricting women's reproductive rights. I directed my gender policy counsel and White House counsel's office to prepare options for an administration response to the continued attack on abortion and reproductive rights. We will be ready when any ruling is issued. So it sounds as if the president's administration is going to fight against it. But like I think you and I kind of said, like, I don't know if they have a choice. Like, I think their hand is kind of.
And what does this do? Because I don't think it's any mystery that Biden has not been a beloved president. And because of the economy and now the war and the gas prices and all these things,
sure,
which many of them were not his fault, but still, that the midterm elections are going to be extremely red. At least it looks that way. What does this do to rally the blue troops?
Well, how about just like taking a step back, like legacy wise, like you want to talk about all of a sudden, you talk about Biden's legacy yesterday. And 2 years from now, whether he wins or loses, if he goes out and his legacy was defending Roe versus Wade, I mean, that's a pretty big shift in legacy.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And it also comes to the fact of, it seems like, maybe this is the way politics has always been, and I'm just, I was too naive to know it. But the world of throwing out someone who they think can win, or as opposed to throwing out someone who they think, if they do win, can be strong. Mm-hmm. And is there a Democratic regret now that Joe Biden was the guy that was picked?
Yeah.
Because, I don't think there's anyone in America. Okay, that was an exaggeration. I think America believes that there were two voters in the 2020 election: the ones who voted for Trump and the ones who voted against Trump. And there weren't a whole lot of people who voted for Joe Biden. So, and now we're seeing that, and whatever you thought about, going back through the presidents, we've had better, Reagan had the strength of his party. Clinton had the strength of his party. Obama had the strength of his party. Trump certainly had the strength of his party. I don't think we feel like right now even Biden has the strength of his own party.
Sure.
So is that something that the RNC and the DNC look at in the future? Like, you know what's worse than losing? Winning and then having a winner that ends up being like a Biden, being like a Jimmy Carter. Like that's
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. I'm trying to see. There's demonstrations starting across America. A lot of college campuses, a lot of outside of courthouses in smaller cities. So yeah. Anything else off the top of your head? Is there anything that you didn't get to say, get off of your chest?
No, I mean, I just, as with you, it's fascinating. Like my blood is not boiling today. I'm not one of those. I'm not, but it's a fascinating historical day, and all the angles of it as to how we got here, what it means from here. But I'm fascinated in the league too. Like there is historical, there's political, and then there's a little bit of like action movie drama, like Tom Cruise, Denzel. How did this happen? It is a fascinating story.
I don't know how to say this because I'm younger, so I don't have like the historical.
Which makes me wiser. Is that what we're saying?
So I don't have like the historical context. I will say that the things in the last probably 5 years or so, there are things that I think foundationally we just kind of, there was this false belief that foundationally these things will be fine and it will never, and whether that's like the Capitol, whether it's the Supreme Court or whatever. And I think what we're beginning to see is like, I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's doomsday. But I think what we're beginning to realize is in a world with technology and social media and all of this stuff, nothing is as secure as it seems.
Right,
doesn't mean the world's falling apart. Doesn't mean we won't figure it out. But I think like 5 years ago, like you couldn't start a riot with social media. Well, yeah, you can. Like 2 years ago, like you would never know what the Supreme Court was planning to do. And well, yeah, you can. Like I think the little cracks and crevices that some of the stuff is showing, sometimes I think it's a good thing because I think instead of it being a flood,
it's not all bad. But you're right. There are things that we thought is rock solid that are not.
And they're not. And here's the thing, like when things aren't rock solid, they either completely break down and they flood and it's destroyed, or you start to see the cracks in the wall and you plaster them and you fix them. And my hope is with some of this stuff, and I think this is a good example of it, I think it's a crack in the wall. I think that as a society, as a country, hopefully we can plaster it and get it sorted out and fix it out. But I'm not as doomsday as a lot of people are. Like when it comes to some of the stuff.
I agree with you, but it's your statement was very well said that it's not things are just not as stable going forward as we thought.
Sure.
Things that we thought were just a given.
Yes.
Like now we're starting to be like, maybe it's not always going to be that way.
Right.
So no, I agree with you. It's a crazy day.
Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news.
That's it. Tomorrow we're talking all hockey playoffs. Go, hey, Leafs, 5-0 last night.
The Leaves, huh?
No, I heard a thing about that, and they even joked about it. Don't call if you call them the Leaves, you might as well leave or something like that. But yes, they are now what?
That sounds like a proper Canadian.
15 wins away from hoisting the cup.
That seems like a proper Canadian insult.
It was something like that.
If you call us the Leaves, you can leave.
I watched maybe maybe 20 minutes of the game, but I saw a segment on how they got the name, and I thought it was funny that we just talked about it.
Thank you guys for watching. I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. We will be back tomorrow.
See ya.